Brittney is going to talk more about mentoring and what it means to her and also her research. And I think this is a really interesting podcast for just parents, teachers, anyone who really is working with children, because I think your research is really important, especially in a classroom effect. So we've just, to recap, we've spoken about how Brittney got into psychology and how difficult it is to study babies. And so you've just been telling us a little bit about, yeah, how you're studying them, what you're studying. Your main research is focused on how noise influences development, though.
Yeah, so I'm very interested in how the environment and the context of the environment affects early development. And so, more specifically for my PhD, I'm looking at noise. So, understanding how, if you have all of this distraction, how then do you figure out as a little baby when everything is new to you, what to focus on, what to learn when you have so much going on? So, how are they focusing their attention and then gaining this information and learning and using it? Um, so yeah, and what we're, is kind of the novel approach to the PhD is I'm actually recording the sound levels from inside their home and then seeing how that may be impacting. So this, how the overall noise and environment that they're exposed to on a regular basis, how could that impact this task that we're showing them on the screen of how they're focusing their attention either in a quiet environment or amongst noise and distraction. So how are they using that experience? Is it, if they're from a noisy home, is that helping them then cope with more noise in a different and new learning environment? Or is it maybe, are they still struggling with it? Or does somebody from a quiet home struggle more with the noise in a new learning environment? So just kind of untangling that a bit.
That's really
Yeah.
interesting, and I think that's really important to remember as a teacher or a parent, that these things all influence your child's learning ability. And sort of, what have you found so far? Have you found any correlations or anything interesting?
So unfortunately, that main big study with babies was put on hold because of COVID. And so I'm like three-fourths done and just waiting to finish off, hopefully by the end of my PhD. But so roughly what we have right now is that there does seem to be this overall effect that they're more, the noise in the background during the task is making it harder for them to pay attention and learn. And then we are seeing a difference between if the baby comes from a quiet home or a noisier home. And so it seems that if they currently, not a full data set, disclaimer, that if they come from a quiet home, that if there's every so often some background noise, which we have a phone buzzing in the background, it's actually almost getting their attention back to the screen because that's roughly where the audio is coming from. So it's almost more of an attention getter, which we weren't, that wasn't the intention we were using it for, but that's how it worked out, which is still interesting. But then if you have the constant background noise, which we made to be as environmentally or to represent the environment as much as possible. So it's very naturalistic. It just sounds like you're sitting in somebody's noisy home with stuff going on. That having all of that background noise is actually making it harder for them to learn. So we have an instance where it's helping them and where it's hindering them. But then if you look at the kids from a noisy home, it's having, regardless of the background noise, it's having no effect. So they're not being aided by the phone buzzing. It's not grabbing their attention at all. They're just ignoring it. And then equally, the constant background noise isn't distracting them either. So we're finding this very different finding based on their home environment, which is pretty cool.
And so,
Very excited
what
by
would
it.
that mean for learning environments? What would that mean for, how would that change learning environments? Would that be then better to have a little bit of noise in the learning environment coming from a screen maybe, or how do you think that would impact, for example, a classroom?
Um, yeah, so first starting off with the babies again. So I've actually just been working on this today. It's also looking at data. So if we look at their home noise and then their auditory sensory processing ability, we see that actually the more noise they're exposed to, the better their auditory processing skills. And so what we think may be happening is that having some noise gives them experience to kind of focus their attention, how to not get distracted by the background noise. But then equally, if they're maybe in this very noisy environment all the time, they begin to just block out all noise. And so it also hinders them from, if they need, if for instance, if there's something going on, so like the phone buzzing and the task is not grabbing their attention then, which also may not be great. So I think it's just, as always in life, maybe balance is key. If you don't want a very quiet environment where they never develop the skills to deal with this background noise, because we don't live in a quiet world. So like in a classroom, as much as you hope and want it to be quiet, that often isn't the case. And so you want to make sure to have that these children have these skill sets to deal with that noise. But then equally don't want to overwhelm them where they might just need to block it out in order to get anything done.
So going back to a little bit of background about this research, what things, mainly I'm thinking like socioeconomic background, what sort of things would influence noise levels in the house?
Yeah, so this was originally going to be the second half of my PhD. But because of COVID, it's not. But I'll actually also talk about the study that I'm about to finish with adolescents. And then it's kind of talk about noise in the environment and learning from home because of COVID. But so what got me interested in this topic and thinking about socioeconomic status backgrounds is that in general, the research out there shows that the lower the socioeconomic status, the more likely there is to be noise in the neighborhood. And that can stem from being more compact in apartments or flats, and having more neighbors, having thinner walls. So building material not being as strong, tend to be closer to train tracks, for instance, or just generally the building and the environment isn't built to be quiet as much as higher income homes. And so, and then there's also this narrative in the literature a bit that's very much, especially with attention, that children from lower SES backgrounds tend to have poor attention skills. And so what I'm trying to kind of understand better is that it's maybe not just poorer, but because of their environment and because of all this noise that they're needing to deal with, they've adapted to that environment. And so their attention skills are really just different because they've been built it up in a different environment. So thinking about the context of that. So instead of saying this child has poor attention skills, can we think of it more as this child has this contextual background from their development? How can we aid that child's attention ability, and how can we use that in a way that's positive and to help them learn better? So that's really what I wanted my second half of my focus to be, but maybe for a postdoc.
Yeah. Well, that's so wonderful. What was it about noise that got you interested? Because you don't really read a lot about noise in research.
Yeah, so it stemmed from, in a lot of research projects, you tend to see that the stimuli they use, so especially with attention tasks, they'll have something to get the child to focus on, and then they'll use a distractor to see if it takes their attention away. And this distractor tends to, while by no means am I saying this research isn't interesting and important, it's hard to really relate that to a child's real world. So when they're living their everyday life, how is this flashing light or this little triangle in the corner, whatever it is, I'm just kind of making things up, how would that actually affect
the beep?
How would that be implemented in the real world? Like, how can that help a parent and educator guide infant and child development? So I just really wanted to expand that to something very naturalistic, and that's why I kind of chose noise, because it's just an easy way to, and kind of the first step to looking at that, to having some naturalistic background noise.
And I mean, that research just has sort of provided a basis for you to build your research on top. And I think
Exactly.
that a lot of times,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
you sort of, you study psychology and you do all these tasks and you think, oh my goodness, this is so useless and boring. But really it is building those building blocks for further
100%.
research.
You really do. And I think that's when like collaborations are really important, of because you can't study everything yourself. It's impossible, as many questions that you have. So you really do need to start building this network and growing your research, and not just thinking in a little mindset, and just making sure it grows and kind of gets from that very specific research focused question to like make sure it gets to real world implications at the end,
Yeah.
and that it travels along that whole journey, all being very important steps.
Yeah.
So I think I'm just trying to focus on the other half.
Yeah. Yeah. The next step, and I think that it's
Yeah.
so wonderful because it is so important. I mean, I was just looking today in the class. Every child's attention is so different, and you really do need these sort of specified plans for each child. But then you also need all this new information, like how noise affects them, because now you can
Mm-hmm.
look at a child and think, well, what is their background, or what is their noise levels like in the house, and how has noise changed their attention in class, and really bringing out the best in
Mm-hmm.
each child. And I think it's really wonderful. Have you, throughout this journey, have you, obviously you've had mentors and supervisors and
Mm-hmm.
things like this, and how has that impacted your research, and how has that helped you, or help,
Yeah.
hopefully not held you back, but how has that impacted what you're doing?
Yeah. I feel very fortunate that I've had a terrific experience where everyone I worked with has been super supportive, but not only just supportive, but also has pushed me. Um, and yeah, it definitely challenged me, but with a feeling of I've got your back too.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, so from the start, from when I was an undergrad, I worked in a research lab for 2 years in the US, and the PhD student there, I just remember getting an email from her on a Sunday at 2 p.m., just being like, I've been thinking about it. You're going to do a research project. And I was like, hey, it's Sunday. Why are you thinking about me? I'm just a lowly undergrad. But just like that one like quick sentence email of like, it just felt like I can do this. Like, she believes I have the competence. This is somebody I really, really looked up to. Um, yeah, it honestly, like, that just set me off on my whole trajectory, that one email. And she always kind of, so I worked on her PhD projects, and she would always have me kind of figure things out on my own first before she would tell me the answer to things. And she always said, I'm not trying to be mean. I just want you to try and figure it out on your own. I was like, I know, Ryan, thank you. A lot of times I didn't get it right, but then it really made sense because I had the time to try and figure it out. And I was, yeah, like, it wasn't demoralizing to be wrong. It kind of gave me that understanding of the process of, oh, it takes time to figure things out. And so, yeah, she really pushed me. And then she also had me go to the PI of the lab and give, kind of present my proposal of the research project I wanted to do, which was my first interesting take on being critically evaluated in the research world. And it was a really good experience. Yeah, she was very nice, but also just asked me questions. So just like not having thought of everything and then having to think in the moment and explain yourself and piece things together was just, yeah, it was a challenge. But she was also incredibly supportive and kind and always gave me advice. And then now, all these years later, I'm working with Natasha Kirkham, also part of the SOFAR network. And she was actually, I heard of her through my PI back then, because they know each other. And I kind of basically stalked Natasha and came here to work with her. So I did my master's with her and now my PhD. And she's been a terrific mentor and definitely always pushes me. But I think what's been very key of the roller coaster of just like being far from home, coming here to a new country, being new in a big city, she also always took the time to check in with me personally. And that always meant a lot of how's the research going, blah, 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 all of that stuff, but also like, how are you doing? And I think that's always been very incredible, and very unique. I don't think everybody always gets that. the ability to cry in your supervisor's office and not feel super embarrassed about it. So yeah, I can say I'm very lucky. And then I've definitely taken that and like really took note, I think, along the way of what's been very vital to me in my growth, and how much it meant to me. And then bringing it back to now the students that I have working on my project. Because I think if I'm going up this path, I'm taking other people with me and I'm going to help them out as much as I can and reciprocate what I've received. So I think it's very important to, like, all the interns and undergrads and master students that I've had, I try to always I never hide my struggle. I think that happens a lot of you, because everything is so chaotic and you can feel so insecure as a PhD student, you tend to want to kind of be perceived as like everything's okay, like I'm strong, I can do this. Whereas I kind of show my frustration and that I don't have all the knowledge and I can't figure it out. Because I think that's really important, that they don't build this false understanding and that they see me as, oh, she knows it all, she can do everything. I can't do it because I don't have all that knowledge. I'm like, there was a day I knew nothing. I've gotten to this point and I think I know about 17% of how things work. So making that clear. And also when having them be part of the project, I try to explain the project and get them to be involved and care about it. And instead of just having them process my data, explain why every step is important, because they're possibly going to be on this journey as well. And so they need to learn these skills and this understanding. So really making them part of the project rather than just like a little minion inserting data in Excel and going crazy, which we've all been there.
We've all had to input data into Excel
Yeah.
for hours on hours.
Yep, it's so fun. Oh, and then having
Academia.
like blocked vision and I can't see because of the screen and Excel driving me crazy.
I think what you're talking about is so transferable into academia as well. I think not necessarily just as a PhD student. I think most people I've spoken to in academia, we feel like we really do need to have everything together at all points.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Imposter syndrome to the max.
I will always remember my first lecture with Simon Green. He just said, like, forget everything you know, we don't know anything. And it was that one thing, it was a joke, but it has stood by me throughout my last 3-4 years studying and just thinking, well, do you know what, we're all just kind of trying to make it work, we're all just trying to figure it out.
And I think that was such, like, when I realized that too, it was such a click in my brain, because I remember coming into my PhD and being like, oh, like, she did it this way. Okay, so this is the right way. I need to do it this way. How does that work for my data though? Like, this isn't really making sense. And then I realized, oh no, she just like figured out that this is what works best for her. This isn't necessarily the way to do it. There's really 1,000 ways to do things. Yeah. It feels like in academia and in research. So it's really about figuring out the reason for why you're doing it the way you're doing it. And there is no right, perfect way. That does not exist. Everything has a limitation. It isn't perfect. So it's just finding the route that has the least limitations. But yeah, so I definitely try and send that message out as well, especially I was demonstrating on a stats course. And they would always look at me like, oh, is this the right way to do it? Should we do this, like really confused. I'm like, there is no perfect way to do it. Just sending that out now. And then like explaining that this is just one of the ways to do it. You could do it this way or this way. It's just, you need to explain why you're doing it the way you're doing it. And I could just see the relief on all their faces.
I think what's always been really amazing for me as well with mentors is, even if they're so much higher up in the academic world than you are, they're so willing to just listen to your input.
Yeah.
Even as a first year, I remember talking to a lecturer about their research, and they was just so open and listening to my input. And now thinking back, I had no idea what I was talking about, but still they were open to listening.
Yeah, and it was courageous of you.
I think that's it's such a wonderful thing, and I think especially in our community at Birkbeck, that is something we do have.
Definitely. Yeah,
so,
I think so.
You're working at the Birkbeck Baby Lab. Tell us a bit more about the Baby Lab.
Yeah.
and what you're doing
Uh,
there?
so the Baby Lab is one of the oldest research centers. And it's, yeah, it started off very focused on early infancy and has kind of over the years grown. And now, like, I'm there and I'm studying adolescence. But it's, yeah, so it's now expanded. We have built and we're about to open the toddler lab, which is the first in the world of its kind, because the toddlers, when they're talking and wiggling and don't want to sit still and say no and don't want to follow instructions, it's very hard to study them actually. So there's not much information we know about their development. So we've kind of developed this new state-of-the-art facility that's built for them to be able to run around and all this stuff while we can still study them. So we're very excited to open that up. But yeah, so it's very much built on collaboration. So everybody working together as a research unit, which is very unique and not established in a way in many universities for it to function that way. Normally it's very separated by labs, whereas this is everyone shares and works together, which is great to have when you're a PhD student, feel like you don't know anything. You don't know how anything works. So just be able to be like, hey, can you help me? And then they'll really help you. But yeah, so we do a lot of research, different kinds. So we have EEG, which is a little cap that measures the brain waves. We have eye tracking. So I do a lot of that, where you just you show a baby video on a screen, and then you can see where their eyes are moving and what they're paying attention to. We do behavioral work, so just playing with the infant or the child, all that good stuff. And yeah, we have, I'm totally blanking on the word. Virtual reality, that's the word, lab, and the toddler lab that's being built, and just it's kind of like a school environment that we have built. So when the kid comes in, it feels like they're in a school classroom. Classroom, a school environment of a classroom. So it's very exciting research. And yeah, we study just almost every aspect of development, both typical and atypical. Honestly, I could go on forever. So I'm trying to think of where to end.
No, it's really amazing. What would be your advice for people who maybe want to get into developmental psychology, not sure where to start, not sure really what to study? What would just be your advice on that subject?
What have I said in the past? I think I would say that understanding what you're not as interested in is just as important as what you are. So just think about when you've been in a class, like what really got your attention and what intrigued you, and just really follow that, and then maybe look up some studies in that area. You can also look at maybe the different lecturers, what they're researching, and you can see then what you'd be most interested versus not as interested. That will help as well. So like, who could you picture yourself working with on that topic? And yeah, it's something that also develops over time and can change. So it's not that you're always going to be interested in the exact same thing. And it's always good to branch out and build your knowledge and your expertise and what you're interested in. So I'd say always kind of follow just what you think you might be most interested in and kind of let it take you. It doesn't have to be this one all be all thing. So I came in very interested in infant attention, and here I am studying noise and adolescence, and I'm studying sleep, and I'm studying sensory processing, and I never thought I'd study these things, and yet I love them and I'm very interested in them. So yeah, I think that would be my advice.
So it's all that openness to new experiences and finding out. Oh, Brittney, it's been so lovely to have you on today. Thank you for being with me and restarting 3 times.
Of course, I would restart 3 times with you anytime.
It's been really lovely. So I just want to recap. We've had Brittney today. She's an amazing developmental PhD student who's just really passionate about all these different areas, like you told us today. It's been really lovely. I hope everyone that's been listening has taken something out of this, and I don't think we have any questions, but if anyone has any questions afterwards, they can contact us, and
Yeah,
I'm sure
definitely.
Brittney will be more than happy to answer that. So we're gonna say goodbye to
Bye,
everyone.
everyone. Thanks for stopping
Goodbye.
by.